Welcome back to Sci-Fi Book Trek. Today we're dealing with the first book of the Culture series, Consider Phlebas by Iain M. Banks. So the Culture series centres primarily on the titular society, the utopian post-scarcity society made up of humanoid aliens and advanced super-intelligent AI who live spread out across the Milky Way galaxy. The series contains 9 major novels and a short story collection. This particular book, as I've already said, is the first of the series, and in terms of the series' internal timeline, is actually set at the earliest point in the timeline. Preliminary research into the other books suggests that events that take place in this novel are referred to in the follow-up novels, so this could be considered kind of required reading if you want to continue with the other books.
However, I don't think it's fully required. From what I gather, it's nice to have the knowledge of, but it's not needed.
The novel was written by Iain M. Banks, which brings us on to our author section. So Banks was born in Dunfermline in 1954. An only child, his mother was a professional ice skater and his dad was part of the Royal Navy Admiralty. He was encouraged to write science fiction after reading Kemlo and the Zones of Silence by Reginald Alec Martin. Banks studied English, philosophy and psychology at the University of Stirling from 1972 to 1975. Banks's writing career actually started at the age of 11. He completed his first work at the age of 16, The Hungarian Lift Jet. After graduation, he took a number of smaller jobs that left him free to write in the evenings, allowed him to support his passion throughout his 20s, and finally released his first published novel when he hit 30 in 1984, titled The Wasp Factory. After the success of The Wasp Factory, his editor advised him to write one book every year, thus making Consider Phlebas his 5th novel in his series of work, released in 1987, which brings us on to our publication year. So a particular one for 1987 that was a bit closer to my heart is that Bon Jovi released Slippery When Wet.
Bill and Ted will be proud of you.
Beethoven's favorite works include Mozart's Requiem, Handel's Messiah, and Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet.
I'm a massive Bon Jovi fan, and I have been ever since I was in primary school. Which
Explains a lot.
Yeah, it does explain a lot.
Well, I'll just say in 1987, there was a first visible supernova seen from the southern hemisphere, but that was the first one since 1604. So it was the first one visible by modern astronomy. And it was from the, or is it the Great Magellan Cloud?
Yeah.
It originated from.
That's neat.
Yeah, it was a fairly bright explosion, like I said, you could see it with the naked eye. And it was a fairly bright star in the sky, not the brightest, but...
But considering how far away that star would have been,
yeah,
the explosion would have happened thousands of years ago.
It actually exploded 168,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Light years, but yeah. So, slightly happened in that date, slightly didn't.
This is an interesting one I kind of found.
Okay.
The max headroom signal hijacking.
Yeah, okay, sure.
So apparently on one night in 1987, I can't remember what the actual date was, but I'll put it up on screen because I haven't put it in the notes.
Because it happened a few times, yeah.
Yeah. 2 separate TV stations got hacked into by pirate TV broadcast, and an image of a guy in a max headroom mask appeared on the screen for not even more than I think the longest one was 90 seconds, but it turned into this weird sort of David Lynchian sort of escapade where at least one of them ends up with the guy on screen having his buttocks smacked with a lady with a fly swatter.
Yes, it gets very odd and weird.
Yes.
But anyway, also this year, Karen Gillan was born.
Okay.
Who came to fame, probably her biggest role was being a Doctor Who companion, I think.
Doctor Who.
Amy Pond.
Yeah.
And she's later gone on to become a movie actress in Jumanji and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Playing Nebula, yeah.
Yeah. Well, then, so have you got another one?
Robert Mugabe is elected president of Zimbabwe.
And nothing bad ever happened.
Well,
moving swiftly on. Movies that were released with Princess Bride.
Hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Full Metal Jacket.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that, Private Pile?
Sir, jelly donuts, sir!
Okay, yeah.
Probably not a double bill. You should watch them both. But and the last one, Harry and the Hendersons.
There are no abominable snowmen. There are no Sasquatches. There are no big feet.
I mean, if you watch all them, you're sorted.
Bit of emotional whiplash between some of them. Oh. So, shall we go into the book?
Yes.
Okay.
Right then, the book itself. It's, of course, a giant space opera. It takes place during wartime between the named culture and another faction. Our main look into it is from the spy for the Idirian Empire, who, though the Idirians are aliens, as in not humanoid, the spy we follow is. He's a sort of minor changeling. He can sort of change some of his appearance to resemble other people, but not fully changeling. And we follow him. We start off with him, and he's locked up, about to be killed in a rather gruesome way. And we're also introduced to his counterpart, the spy from the culture, Belveda.
Yes.
And
easier to call her Balveda than to try and go for the full.
Oh yes,
the full name. Which, I mean, would you like me to attempt it?
By all means.
Dubois Rabaransa Perestek Alison Balveda Dam Tassel.
Did you write down Holz's full name?
Yes. Ora Horza Gobachul. Some of the other characters are so much easier to say.
Yes. I mean, that is one good thing. Banks does have names which do sound, alien and sci-fi, but fairly easy to pronounce. It's like there tends to be a standard way. Well, the main name he uses tends to be...
You can at least give them a sort of a nom de guerre.
Yeah, as opposed to, I'm just going to randomly stab at what these letters mean. As opposed to a few other sci-fi authors. But yeah. And like I said, it goes on from there, from these two spies eyeing each other, and it all starts off, well, the main story starts off in the beginning.
Start at the beginning.
Yeah. And when you come to the end, stop.
Where a shipyard is attacked, a cultural shipyard is attacked, and it sends off a last ship to try and save this AI mind inside. And that mind crashes on a abandoned world, let's say. Don't give away too much. But that's the initial start. And so the two spies have to try and be first to claim it, essentially.
Yeah.
But it's about the trials and tribulations of mostly Horza and what he goes through and the struggle he has to do just to complete his job.
Yes. I mean, it's an interesting viewpoint because predominantly the culture series is regarding the culture society.
Society, yes.
But to begin with, we see it from a very much antagonistic viewpoint in Horza, and so it's an interesting place to start.
Yeah.
Especially if you were to continue to go on and look at the other novels in the series to find out how the culture is being viewed by their enemies.
Yeah.
Especially considering they are supposed to be a utopian society, post-scarcity, so everyone's allowed to engage in their pursuits, their whims. They don't have to worry about work. They can just engage in whatever makes them happy.
Especially you, hedonism bot!
But the Adirians are very much an alien species.
Yeah.
They have 3 legs and are built like brick shithouses, from what I could tell.
A lot taller. Yeah.
Quite a gigantic race.
And you learn also a lot about their background and culture and their setup.
But in that way, I think he does do a very good job of certainly characterising Horza.
Yeah.
Showing us his viewpoint, his thoughts, like you say, the way that he thinks, showing some of the races, some of the ways that they believe, does a good job of showcasing the culture in some respects.
Oh yeah, I mean it does feel like a fleshed out universe, and like because you'll have other factions of humans who are not part of the culture, and they're, you know, you'll have some factions which are like mercenaries, you'll have some factions which are independent worlds and colonies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, if that seems interesting or piques your interest, well, you know where to start. However, I would add a caveat. If you start reading it, you get a part way into it, don't give up. Carry on. And if you really, really have to, maybe skip to page 200 and start reading again. Or, you know, roughly like that.
Yes.
Well, like without any spoilers, it's just if you get stuck or it's perfect. Well, I think it's perfectly acceptable to skip part of this.
I agree. I think there's at least one section of this that could have been completely discarded without giving spoilers. You could have discarded one entire section and it wouldn't have made any difference to the narrative, wouldn't made any difference to the story.
Yeah, I think I know the exact one you're talking about.
And I think it does weaken... It weakens the story by its presence. It didn't need to be in there.
Yeah.
So the actual levels of science fiction in the book are semi-crunchy. There's a little bit of hard sci-fi in it in some places, but then you've got elements like FTL, for instance, that are kind of glossed over. So...
Well, there are some areas which, like, a lot of thought's gone into.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I particularly like some of the tech ideas, like the needle laser. So I kind of like that tech aspect, but it's not a defining part of the story. The actual technology involved isn't so deep, even with the elements of the the super intelligent AI, which is the plot MacGuffin. There is a sort of explanation as to how that works, but only enough for you to sort of whet your appetite on it.
Do you want to say something about the title of the book?
It's...
Right, so we'll just say this. If you're going to read this, don't expect you to find a character called Phlebas.
No.
That's all I will say.
All I'm saying is, what if this is as good as it gets?
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
It's not a reference to something in the book. I mean, sort of. It's a reference to T.S. Eliot poem, which the last part of the poem is in the front of the book. Like, starts. At least in my copy it was.
Okay, well, I don't think it was in mine.
Right. Well, it should be, because that's what it's referring to. The title of the book is referring to a T.S. Eliot poem. So, don't feel, disappointed that someone isn't called Phlebas in a book you're reading. There is a Phlebas in it. He's just not called that. Anyway, we'll go on to recommendations.
Okay. I can't say I hated it.
Well, that's at least a start.
See, that I enjoyed it to a point. As I've said, there was one particular section which led it down, and I think the ending, considering the rest of the story, I think the ending let me down as well. But for the most part, I quite enjoyed the story. I quite enjoyed the adventure elements of it. I like the technology.
Yeah.
I've lost worse time reading a book, so it's not a strong recommendation, but yeah, you could do worse. I'm quite okay with this one.
Okay. I mean, would you go on to read the next one?
I possibly would, yeah. This one would encourage me probably to read the next one more so than Revelation Space.
Okay.
Based on the personal experience that I had with Revelation Space.
That's fine. Wrong, but fine.
My opinion is not wrong. My opinion is my opinion.
You chose poorly.
Right, as for myself, I would go on to read more cultural novels. They do seem interesting. Like, the culture does come across in this book, even though it's written from not the culture's point of view, for the most part. And it does seem like the most interesting part of the world. However, for this book, it's a partial recommendation. For me, I would say read the first 30 pages, then skip 200 pages and carry on reading. For me, the ending was fine. I kind of liked the ending and kind of sort of expected the ending, but maybe that's because I went in knowing
the T.S. Eliot poem?
Well, no, not the poem, but what it meant. Because the poem is very short.
Yeah.
The poem is I would say it's barely 10 lines. It gets in there and gets out. And I wish Banks had actually took that and gone, right, we need to get this story in and out.
Matron, please.
Instead, it just meanders for the first half of the book. But yeah, anyway.
So that brings us to the conclusion.
Yeah.
So guys, the Consider Phlebas novel is still available from most good bookshops. You can also get audiobook form from your retailers for such things, including Audible. Whether you get brand new copies is another question, but there's plenty of used versions floating
or
about with different
new, old stuff. Yeah.
As new.
Yeah.
Right. So that brings us to the end of the review. Thanks, guys, for watching. Next week we'll be doing our spoiler review of Consider Phlebas. If you don't fancy following up with our review, obviously give it another 2 weeks and we'll be covering a different book.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Bye. We have to start doing the like.
No.
subscribe.
I just did it to annoy you.
So, the novel is written by Iain M. Banks, which brings us on to our author section. Glad that happened early so that I can... Why do I keep forgetting? Next week we'll be covering our spoiler review of Consider Phlebas. If you're not interested in... Fucking hell, come on!